This is Friday, April the 16th, and this is World History. Now, I haven't had a chance to grade your quizzes that you took yesterday. I hope to grade them sometime over the weekend. My goal is to get them to you on Saturday. We're going to look at the Great Depression. The Great Depression began right at the conclusion of World War I and lasted until the mid-1930s. Now, many countries decided to get out of the Great Depression. They would build war materials. And this will lead many countries to declare war on each other, and will finish with World War II, which was far more devastating than World War I. World War I had left the economy of the world crippled. Industrial nations were suffering the most. Nations that depended upon agriculture, not so much. So in Europe, countries like Great Britain and France and Germany were hard hit because they were so industrial. In the 1920s, a depression greater than any country had ever seen before is going to first engulf Europe and then later engulf the United States. Each nation was thrown into political and economic chaos. Protectorates in Asia and Africa are now without leadership, and many of them are going to declare their independence. In the early 1920s, Germany was hit hard by a depression. Now, Germany had used up all of its money to fight the war, and as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, was required to pay huge sums of money, what we call reparations, to the countries who had defeated them. The value of German money becomes less and less and less, and it takes more and more of these dollars to buy the necessities of life. By the 1930s, all countries in Europe and the United States were in the grips of the Depression. Now, the economy in the United States began in 1929, when the stock market in New York City is going to crash. That's where everybody is selling and nobody is buying. Each country in Europe and the United States would have to plan how do they get out of the Depression. Now, in large industrial countries, we must achieve economic stability for the Depression to end. Many believed that the failure to achieve economic stability would cause a new war, a world war. We're going to go through some of the countries of the 1920s and 30s and see what happened to them because of the Great Depression. Now, Ireland had always been a part of Great Britain for years and years and years. But at the end of World War I, there had been an Irish uprising between Catholics and the Protestants who ran the country. The Catholics are going to call for independence. In 1921, they are going to propose and achieve what is called the Irish Free State. Now, the Irish Free State will have its capital in Dublin, but not all Irish were gung-ho for this. There are some Irish who live in the Ulster area that are Protestant, and they were opposed to this independence. They became what is known as Northern Ireland and are part of the United Kingdom as we speak today. China. After World War I, the nations of the world met to discuss what to do about the spheres of influence in China. Now, eventually, the Nine-Power Treaty was created. The Nine-Power Treaty says that China was a free and independent state, that China could create a constitution. However, Japan did not agree with the findings of the Nine-Power Treaty, and Japan called for economic control of China by Japan. The first publicly elected leader of China was Sun Yat-sen. Now, Sun Yat-sen is going to emerge as a political leader. He is acceptable to all the various warlords of China, and he is going to be elected the first president. Now, the first thing Sun Yat-sen suggested was that all Chinese should boycott Japanese products because he felt that the Japanese were up to no good. Now, Sun was a medical doctor by training. He had received his training in the United States. But Sun did not live very long in the 1920s, and when he died, he is going to be replaced by this man, Chiang Kai-shek. Now, Chiang Kai-shek was a warlord who lived in what we would today call the Nanking area. Chiang was fiercely anti-Japanese. Chiang was fiercely anti-communist. Now, there was a move toward communism in the northern part of China. The Chinese, most of the wealthy Chinese, are going to agree with Chiang. Treaties with Western nations, he believed, had destroyed China, and so he calls for them to be eliminated. The Chinese say that no matter the time or the place, the Chinese are free and independent. Now, Chiang used this opportunity to propose to drive the communists out of China. To use a communistic term, he called for a purge. Now, most of the Chinese will escape into the hills of northern China for protection. Now, the communist Chinese are led by this man, Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong had been educated in the Soviet Union, and Mao is going to turn to the peasants for support. Mao said that what Chiang was trying to do was take more land for the wealthy. The peasants are going to support Mao, and they are going to call for land reform. They believe that Mao must have their support, and they create an army which they call the Red Army. The Red Army because the Chinese Communist flag is crimson red like the Soviet Union. Chiang and Mao's forces will clash. The communists are overmatched, and soon they begin what is called their long retreat. Now, as the communists tried to escape the nationalists, they were bombed, they were starved, they fell victim to disease. This time is called in the communist lore as the Long March. Now, the communists were just a shell of themselves by the mid-1930s. Now, luckily for the communists, this is when Japan will begin its expansion into China. Japan is needing iron. Japan is going to take over Manchuria. The Japanese were soon to come into conflict with the nationalists of the South. The Japanese are going to extend their power over China. They're going to seize more and more land. The nationalists were unable to stop the Japanese. In the Japanese legislature, it fell under the control of military leaders. These military leaders called for expansion of the Japanese to move into Southeast Asia, which at the time was controlled by the French and the Dutch, in hopes of gathering more and more. This video here deals with the adventures in China and how the Japanese reacted. I think this would probably be a pretty good time for us to stop. On Tuesday, we are going to look at the Italians. Now, it's important to try to print out the two maps that are in your packet. You're going to need them for the run-up to World War II, and that's what we'll be doing on Tuesday and Wednesday, and for World War II, which is what we'll be doing the end of next week and the beginning of the last week of April.